Welcome to Side Alpha Leadership, a podcast where leaders can share their experiences and discuss what leadership means to them. I'm your host, David Polikoff. Hello and welcome to this month's edition of Side Alpha Leadership. I'm your host, David Polikoff. On the phone today, I have Justin McCarthy. Justin is the Assistant Chief at the New Haven, Connecticut Fire Department in the city of New Haven. Justin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, David. I appreciate it, being able to be here this month.
So I know we have some mutual friends in common up in the Northeast. I've had at least one of them on the show, and then one of them that got to hang out with at FDIC between Frank Ritchie and PJ Norwood. Moreover, let's tell me a little bit about yourself and where you are in the fire department and how you got to where you got, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, those are two guys that I tend to hang out with. They guide me a little bit. I started as a volunteer in a combination department. Actually, the department my father retired as assistant chief from, a small department, Westport. It's my parents' hometown, my grandparents' hometown. Smaller combination department down closer to New York City, and went to University of New Haven up here, which has a great fire science program, and graduated from there. I went to work for a small department, Wilton, which is another closer to Fairfield or closer to New York City, very small two-station department, 6 people on duty at a time, covered kind of a bigger, much more suburban area. And I was there for about a year, and New Haven called, and I came here. Best move, I thought, of my life. I came here when I was in my early 20s, and I'm coming up on my 20th year in the fire service. Made assistant chief about a year and a half ago. Prior to that, worked in some busy companies and came up through the training division for the last couple of years before I made assistant chief. So that's basically my fire service background. There's other things sprinkled in there. Love teaching, love doing that stuff. Taught at FDIC a number of times, and it was a great experience. And that's kind of me in a nutshell there.
Yeah, teaching at FDIC, it's a really cool experience. And for those that listen, if you've never been to FDIC, you got to go. It's an awesome place to network. The cool thing is that you actually, if you're into the fire service and into reading the magazine and things like that, the books, you get to actually sit down and just talk with these guys that you've been around or that you've known through the publication for your whole life. You find yourself in a bar and you're drinking a beer with John Norman or Salka or Mike Champo. It's funny. It's like, dude, I just read your book. It's I tell people, I say, these are my sports heroes or whatever you want to say. These are the people that I would rather rub elbows with. So it's a really cool experience being at FDIC, and you meet a ton of people. So for those that don't,
that's actually,
yeah.
I gotta jump in for a second because you just reminded me, and you and I hadn't discussed this beforehand, but one of the funniest stories I have about being out there, because that's the most true statement, is you actually are with the people that you look up to and idolize. I was in the bar at FDIC. One of the guys in my circle had just taken a promotional test, and he didn't do great on it. And the area that he didn't do great was the Norman book. So he was going on a tear about how the Norman book killed him on the test, and he couldn't believe it. And he's from a smaller town, and they rely on John Norman from New York to write the book. And John Norman was standing next to me. I personally didn't see him. Those guys didn't see him. He turned around and he went, "Hey man, I'm really sorry. My book screwed you on that test." He ended up hanging out with us. He had a beer with us. I've met him several times since then. I was in my early 20s when I first met him. When you meet these people, they're just like us, right? I mean, they're normal firefighters that just love the fire department. They want to hang out with other firefighters, talk shop, and compare notes. And it's a really great experience. So I just had to throw that in there real quick because I love that story. It's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that is that you would think that they would like, I don't have time to hang out with you, underlings, whatever. They're not like that at all. Like you said, they're totally into the job. The people that are out there are totally into the job, and you can just have a great conversation with these guys. We were not last year, year before last. It was Frank and I and a whole bunch of people. We were at one of the cigar bars and drinking and smoking cigars, and Anthony Vella is sitting with us, and guy's hilarious. I ended up having him on my show, but these people are just down to earth, and that's one of the things that when we talk about leadership, one of the big points that we always hit is humility. Don't forget where you came from, and recognize that you are a firefighter, and that's how you started off, and then you've gained knowledge and experience, and you pass that on. So there's no reason to be an ass about it. And like I said, I haven't run into anybody that hadn't been willing to sit down and just crack a joke and drink a beer with you, especially when you're out in Indiana, and you're just in that closed environment. It's actually really cool. So a couple of things I want to hit on. You talked about being a volunteer in a combination department. Combination departments are really big on the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast. So for people that don't know, that's a combination of career and volunteer in the same, working in the same city or community, firehouse, county, however you want to look at it. We have a bunch of big combination departments in the Mid-Atlantic area where I am. Almost every department that surrounds the Baltimore, Washington metropolitan area, with the exception of Baltimore City and Washington, D.C., they're all combination departments. So just so people understand that. And then the other thing is, if people are listening like New Haven, well, that's where Yale is. So if anybody wants to know, that's where the epicenter of the high-browed Ivy League schools are. Not to be confused with Harvard. So you said you went to school. You didn't go to Yale. That's what you definitely said that you did not go to Yale, but that's all good. You probably came out with a better degree anyway.
Listen, I go to Yale all the time on activated fire alarms,
Right.
medical calls, odors of gas. That's how I make it to Yale.
That's right. So one of the things that we talk about on the show, we try to talk about the different aspects of leadership and how it transcends to the fire service. It transcends into the police department, the military, and even corporate world. And I've had all walks of life. I've had military people, Navy SEALs. I've had police officers, corporate people in here, nurses, things like that. One of the things that I always find interesting is that the issues and how they deal with people, it's really similar when you talk about the fire service and the different personalities and egos and problems that they bump up against. It's almost the same throughout. It's kind of funny. I tell everybody, I said, the fire service is the same no matter where you go. I said, I can fly to China and I can sit down in a firehouse in China and they'd be bitching about B shift also. So it's the same regardless of where you go. The fire service is the same. And what I have found is that in all employment, leadership is the same. How we tackle problems. So one of the things I want to ask you, you work in the city department, and you get to see all different kinds of things. In your opinion, what do you think makes a good leader? That's like a really generic question, but what do you think makes a good leader, and what are you looking at when you're seeing these up and coming guys that are coming through the ranks that you know what, that guy's going to be really good because.
So with the unique leadership piece, it's about being exuding what you want, right? And one of the things that I always see that in a successful leader is, first and foremost, they don't complain down, and they aren't part of the problem. They're always part of the solution, whatever that problem might be. It doesn't matter if it's something administrative or something on the fire ground. They're going to be part of the solution. And it's also about passion, right? If you're passionate about what you're doing, you're going to get the people that you have to lead passionate. A lot of times, and you kind of hinted at it, one of the things that we say, I've heard said numerous times up here, is if you want to find a liar, right, talk to a firefighter after they've been on for 6 months. They'll tell you how terrible the job is, yet they'll love it more than anything in the world. And you don't want to be part of that culture. You want to be part of the positive culture. and you want people to know how much you care about them and the mission, whatever it is. And that is the kind of the foundation that you have to build your leadership around. And then from there, I think it's about fairness, right? And that's something that I never really gave a lot of credence to, because I think that it just came naturally to me. But recently I had a retiree come up to me and say, you know what I keep hearing about you is you're always fair. And I never really thought about that, because I think it was just my personality. But he was telling me how far it went for some of the younger guys that he talked to, that when they see people treated fairly, they have a lot more buy-in. They have a lot more trust in who's leading them. And to be honest with you, it doesn't matter what you're doing. The people who are below you that want to be led, which is most people, they need to be able to trust the decision-making. They need to be able to trust the leader as a whole. They need to be able to rely on that person. You know, when they're having the bad day or having the questionable thing in their life, they need to be able to trust their leader. And if they do that, they're going to rely on that leader all the time. And it's going to cause them to buy into the mission. And so I think those are kind of the key components that I see, especially in the younger generation that's coming up of leaders that we have. You know, they thrive following those types of people, and I think it's key.
It's one of the things that, and I always say that, but I think that people need to realize is that you got to learn those traits, and then you have to earn that respect. You just don't put on the white shirt and you get the badge and now you're a respected leader. It's something you have to prove yourself almost all over again. You proved yourself as a firefighter, and that guy's a great firefighter. Okay, great. He can ride the back step. He can pull lines. He can pull ceilings. He can search. All that stuff. He's a good driver. But when it comes to being the officer, it takes on a different role. It goes beyond those particular tactics, and you have to be able to be to learn how to be a good leader. And something that you and I talked about offline is that the fire service does a huge injustice to officers or future officers, because we don't put them in a position to be a good officer. What I mean by that is that you go through recruit school and they teach you how to be a firefighter. They teach you how to pull the line and how to put on your gear and your SCBA and search and rescue and throw ladders and all that stuff. And you get 6 months or so of that just structured training, and you come out knowing the basics, and then you build off of that. And then you put in 4 years, and next thing you know, you're sitting for the lieutenant's test. What has the department done to prepare you to be a good leader in that organization? Because the department wants you in that position. They need you in that position, but yet they don't set you up. Now, I know that there are some organizations out there that have officer candidate school, and you may have to go to officer candidate school for a week or something like that. But for the most part, it's like, hey, you passed the test, you did really well. You're riding aid on the ambulance this shift. The next shift, report to engine so-and-so, and you're riding the front seat as the boss on that engine company now. And what have we done? And I find it's a huge injustice in the fire service that we don't prepare our up-and-coming people that want to move through the ranks to be good at the ranks. I know they do in the military. You got to go to schools in order to advance through the ranks, and in order to be a sergeant or an officer, a non-commissioned officer or even a commissioned officer. There's training that goes with that. Obviously, they can't throw you in the middle of a war, but you learn towards that. So what would you suggest, or what have you seen, or maybe what is New Haven doing, or some of the departments that maybe you've seen doing to tackle this, or is it just still an ongoing issue?
Oh no, this is definitely an ongoing issue. I see it with us. I see it with our brothers and sisters over at the PD up here. And for reference, we have about 350 firefighters in New Haven, just over 400 police officers. You're dealing with a lot of people. And we, just like you said, have anywhere from 1 to 2 week training. for each of the ranks. And what we hammer during those periods of time, right? Those 1 to 2 weeks, it isn't how to manage people, right? It's how to do the administrative work. It's how to do a size up properly, how to, we always joke, it's how to ride the siren, right? Because a lot of people, and we're seeing this, they're great at riding the siren, right? They're great at operating the siren when they go on a call. But when they get there, what's happening, right? Are they making good decisions? Are they making consistent decisions? Are they able to think about things constructively? Are they able to work with their crews well? Does their crews, are their crews trusting of their decisions? All that stuff. And I look to some of the other bigger departments. I know New York City does a lot of officer training, and you have to have certain levels of education to promote up and things of that nature. But for most departments, that's really a hard thing to do. I know for years there were suggestions about sending people to even college level leadership courses that were not geared towards the fire service at all. They were just geared toward people management. And a lot of these municipalities kind of balk at that. It was kind of a pipe dream here for a little bit for a few of us to do it. And, there's always the issues of time and funding and who's paying for the overtime to cover the shift, or, there's so many roadblocks that get faced. But like you said, it's a real disservice to the overall organization. I look at the folks over at the PD. We recently had an officer involved shooting. The police officer was pulling up on a call, and person opened fire into the windshield of the car. From a leadership standpoint, you could prepare for that on an operations side. But how are you managing people as they come in? How are you, because the PD operates so differently than we do. They operate much more individually. They did a great job, and I think overall it was a success. The officer was only wounded, and his, he's been discharged and he's doing well. But we prepare for situations like that all the time, but we aren't preparing for the other basic human interactions that we have to do every single day. And that's what I think leadership is really based around, right? Is that human interaction. It goes well beyond stretching a line or doing a size up, which is where we kind of, almost draw a line in the sand on that training is we say, okay, you're really good at doing a size up in a classroom, so you must be qualified to be an officer. And it's like, well, hang on a second. What are you going to do when that, when you have that personnel issue, or you're pulling up to that scene that's completely chaotic and different from what you went over in the classroom, using YouTube videos or using, still images. It's very, very different. And I agree with you. We do a total disservice, but I think that's across the board. I think I was saying to you offline, like we were saying, was my sister's in corporate America, and she has a team underneath her. And I've talked to her about this. Her and I have very similar styles in dealing with people, but we weren't formally trained in that, right? Neither one of us went to college for leadership. Neither one of us went to any type of classes for leadership. It's kind of just, it's personality driven, and a lot of looking at the people who led us and saying, hey, I really like the way this person did this, so I'm going to emulate that. Or I really hate the way this person did this, so I'm never going to do that. And that's not really a great way to do it. It lacks consistency, and it lacks real formative, style.
It even goes, you can learn to give that size up. You can learn, if you had a good officer above you, how to lead somebody down a hallway or something. I think that's a skill that we can learn. But when it comes to the dealing with people, and that's like 80% of the job, the others is fire and EMS, but the rest of it is in-station stuff, not necessarily administrative paperwork, but more of the dealing with people. And, everybody that listens to the show knows that firemen get themselves in some pretty decent predicaments, whether it's on duty or off duty, and how do we navigate that? And having somebody that not necessarily has the experience because they may be a new officer, but to be able to talk and listen and provide advice and then guide them in the right direction. I think that's a big part of what we're missing. What would you think if you were, and one thing you did hit on, you talked about money and budgets and all that stuff. Yeah. I think a good officer candidate school would be a month, in my opinion, where we can just really sit back and dig into the different aspects of being an officer and how to start to learn how to hone your leadership skills, how to hone your decision making skills. 5 days isn't going to cut it. Even 10 days isn't going to cut it because there's so much information. So it comes down to, like you said, money and overtime and budgeting and instructors and stuff like that. So if we could put all that aside, what would you like to see if you could develop a leadership class for the fire service? What are some of the topics that you would talk about, or what entities would you bring in maybe from the outside to teach how to listen, how to navigate personal issues or emotional issues, or how to navigate things that happen in the fire department, how to make fast decisions. In corporate America, you don't always have to make a decision in seconds. Yeah, you might have weeks. In the fire service, we have to make decisions in seconds, and hope. And not only that, based on partial information and sometimes not even good information, and then be able to change on the fly. So if Justin McCarthy could develop a leadership class, how long do you think it would be, and what would you like to see in it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to think of all the topics I would want to cover. So yeah, I mean, I would think a month would scratch the surface, right? And then probably some continuing education would be key. A lot of times we see folks that, and I saw it here when I got hired here. We were a much older job, right? I mean, right now our senior person still only has, and it's a lot for this generation, 27 years. When I came on, there was 40 plus year members, and you would see people that learned something in the academy and had not evolved from that, right, over the course of 20 or 30 years. So continuing education would be something that I think is crucial to a leadership program. But I think the first and foremost is bringing in leaders that have actually worked. I'll call them peers. We always laugh about people that, those who can't teach, right? Now, I don't believe in that. I love teaching, and I like to think that I've accomplished things. I've worked in busy companies. I've earned respect over the years from my peers, but having true peer folks come in and give live experience, right? And give real world examples. And some of them are going to be very uncomfortable. I think that would be first and foremost. The next thing is you have to learn early on how to make a decision, how to own a decision, and how to be comfortable doing that in, like you said, high stress environments when you have imperfect information, and your job is to make a perfect decision with imperfect information, right? Every single time. And so making sure everybody's comfortable actually making a decision. One of the things that I hear constantly from every rank on the department is the people below me, insert name here, right? Lieutenants, the captains will talk about the lieutenants, the battalion chiefs will talk about the captains, and so on and so forth. Is, if that guy just made a decision, he'd be better off, but he waits for, so-and-so, the captain, to get there and make sure that he's doing it correctly or she's doing it correctly. And, the chiefs are getting questioned on the way to a call that they're not even on scene yet. What do you want me to do here? We need to make sure people who are in positions of leadership or positions of officers' positions, we'll say, need to be able to make those decisions, be comfortable, confident with them, and need to know that when they make a mistake, barring catastrophe, they're gonna be okay. We're gonna figure this out. Now, in this profession, obviously, a wrong decision can be catastrophic, but most of the decisions that we're making aren't going to result in a catastrophic thing. And if you're teaching people in a positive way when they do make a mistake, then you're going to coach them right into the right decision on a regular basis. And I think that's crucial. Far too often, and I don't, I hear about it from my father a little bit. He was in the fire service for 30 plus years. It is something that's becoming more glaring. I think it was always there where people were afraid to make a decision. It seems like nowadays it's a little bit more prevalent, and I have my theories. I'm not 100% sure why, but I think those would be the crucial parts of an officer or leadership training. And then from there, just making sure that people know you're dealing with humans, and humans are going to do things you don't expect, and it's okay, right? You don't have to fly off the handle because somebody didn't do it right. I had a friend of mine who used to say all the time, okay, you had your chance. I don't want you to do your best anymore. I want you to do my best. And that's not, while it's a funny statement, it's not really the best statement. You want to bring people up to your level if they're not at your level. And if there's a problem, you need to adjust it. But you also need to do it in a way that is going to get people to buy in. If everybody hates you, you're not going to get anywhere. And so I think that would be a crucial part of it too, is just, even having people come in that are able to do, understand human nature and people, take the fire service piece out of it and just understand dealing with people. I mean, essentially as a leader, you are the human resources director for anybody behind you. And you have to know how to massage issues because they do come up. Like you said, 80% is spent in, dealing with the people underneath you or with people in general. Not every single person has the same life experience, came from the same background, is the same age, is the same race, is the same gender. Everybody's got a different viewpoint. And one of the things that I started doing to articulate that, somebody showed me, you write a 6 on a piece of paper and you have each person stand on either side. To one person, it's a 6. To one person, it's a 9. And how it's all about perspective, right? If you guys flip around, now it's a 6 and a 9 to the other person. And you have to kind of look at that and say, they're coming from a totally different place than I am. And it's fine, but let's try to find the common ground to continue the mission forward. So I think those would be pretty crucial things to any leadership training, and then just building from there and taking real world experiences from the organization, right? Because that's going to make them see the positives and negatives of those situations.
I think it is important to take the lessons learned from past officers, that we can push that onto the new people. It allows them to build up their Rolodex in their head of, hey, my lieutenant talked about this time he ran that call. I'm kind of seeing the same thing here. This is what he did. Until you build that up in your own mind. I think, when it comes to decision making, and I've talked about this a lot. I actually, when I was a battalion chief, when I worked in Montgomery, I had actually went around for about a month and hit all my stations and just sat at the kitchen table and asked the guys, point blank, why do you think people are afraid to make decisions? And what I wanted to hear was what their perspective was, and from everybody, even from some new kid that just got out of the recruit class. Wanted to know, why do you think people are afraid to make decisions? And the number one answer was they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. That was the number one answer. And so that led me into a couple of different directions. The first question I asked myself is, what have we done in the fire service to make people afraid to make a decision? That's what I asked to myself. What I asked externally was, who's getting in trouble? And they couldn't provide an answer.
I was just going to say, I bet you they couldn't come up with that.
And I'm like, seriously, who's getting in trouble? And they don't know. And I'm like, so this fear of making a decision is based on either a perception that we as senior staff have projected onto the members, um, that we are tyrants, or they have never been taught and they feel uncomfortable making a decision because of, and this is where my belief is peer ridicule. Of saying the wrong thing on the radio. We all hear it. We laugh when people say the wrong thing on the radio or say something dumb on the radio. People, I think, are afraid of that, and they're afraid to make a mistake. And I think that us, as the senior staff, battalion chiefs, assistants, deputies, fire chiefs, if we instill into our people, it is okay to make mistakes because this job isn't perfect. As long as you're not killing or hurting people, it's okay to make mistakes, because then we'll fix it. We'll figure out what you did. Was there a lack of training? Did you just not know? Maybe you didn't see the big picture. We have to ask those questions. The first question you have to ask is, why did you do that? And then hear, like you said, hear their perspective. This is what I saw, chief. This is what I did. Blah blah blah. As a chief officer, we can't inject our views and how we would handle things onto them. I used to, when I was a lieutenant, I had a captain. It was probably the best captain I ever had, and he made a statement that has stuck to me to this day, and I say it all the time: different is not wrong; it's just different. And when people make a decision, it might not be how you would have handled it. Well, that's okay, because people think and react and look at situations differently, and they still come up with a working solution. I'd rather have a solution that's 70 to 80% there, and we'll bring it across the line to 90 or 100. But if you flat out made a poor decision, you have to use that as a teachable moment. You have to be able to pull the officer aside, find out what they saw, why they did what they did, and then talk to them. And I think if we can start putting that out there, that hey, it's okay to make mistakes. The chief was pretty cool about that, and I learned something. And then what I tell people is that if you keep making the same mistakes, then I'm going to probably give you a factory reset in the back of the head. But we just want to make sure that you're learning as you move forward. So that was my big takeaway: is that everybody I talked to said they were afraid they were going to get in trouble, but yet nobody could ever put a finger on anybody that ever got in trouble for making a decision.
It's funny when you said that. I almost said it over you because I could picture that in the firehouse and hearing that. And the other thing that I do want to add to that is we have to be very careful as leaders in the micromanagement world, because it exudes a getting in trouble, right? Well, if he's telling me how to do it, I must not be able to do it, or I must not know what I'm doing, or I must not. It kind of takes somebody's legs out. And one of my battalion chiefs is very good at, he is the type of chief that shows up without the lights and sirens on. He wants people to get there, get on scene, make a mistake, recover, talk about the mistake after. He goes, I don't want to pull up as they're trying to adding stress to a stressful situation. If I can buy them a couple seconds to make their mistake and recover, and then we talk about it afterwards, which a lot of his crew is very good at, it shows his crews, and he has 5 companies or 5 stations under him with multiple companies. He has a big swath of people under him. His crews, you could hear their confidence on the radio versus somebody who micromanages, whose crews, you can hear over the radio they almost talk in question form, and that's usually a sign of something's wrong, right? When they're talking in question form over the radio, I'm stretching a line, that's usually a red flag that they're being micromanaged, and that's something that pulls the leadership ability from the people in the most crucial roles, right? The most crucial roles tend to be the middle management, lieutenants, captains, and even up to the battalion chiefs. You need them to be confident in making their decisions and leading the crews to actually do the work, because they're the ones that are in the peril, right? So they need to have confidence, and they need to be sure of themselves without being a overbearing or cocky, right?
Yeah, I agree, and it's funny you said that when they make a statement on the radio and it's in a question format. I was actually writing down something that's very similar when I was in the car as a battalion chief, and I've mentioned this on past podcasts, is that I would always look to my officers is my well I have to look to my officers as the eyes on the inside. So I need you to give me factual information. So a couple of times, most of the time, as the fire's winding down or whatever, I would come back and say, hey, you got the fire knocked, how much overhaul do you have, blah blah blah. All right, I'm looking for a recommendation, we can scale this back. Give me a recommendation. And they'll say, Chief, I think we can hold it with 2 engines, a truck, and an ambulance. And I'd come back on the radio and I'd say, okay, well, when you know for sure, get back on the radio and let me know, because I'm asking you a question and I don't need a question coming back. And sometimes people are like, oh, what a dick on the radio. But no, what I'm trying to tell you is that I want you to make a decision and give me that information so I can act upon it. And it almost became a joke, but that was how I felt, that I'm trying to empower you to make decisions. I trust you to give me good information so I can continue to move this incident forward. So I would do things like that. One of the other things that I would do is I would always tell my captains, hey, you can come to me with a problem all day long, but you better have a solution in your pocket, because I'm not here to solve all the problems. Now, obviously, if it's if it's a big problem like an HR issue or something like that, then yeah, we're gonna go outside to get the help. But the minor stuff, come to me with what's going on. Let me know what your solution is. And a lot of times I would get a phone call, hey, Chief, this has happened and this has happened. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this, this, and this. Are you cool with that? And then I could come back and say, yep, that sounds like a great plan. I appreciate it. Or I'd say, hey, look, you didn't know, but this unit's getting ready to go out of service. So how about if we move this unit over there? Those type of things. So I'm trying to teach these guys to think for yourselves, figure out what the issues are, and then come up with solutions, and then offer those solutions. And I'll use anybody's plan all day long if it's a decent plan. It doesn't have to be 100%, but be close. And one of the last things I did before I retired is I was trying to get the officers to empower their firefighters to kind of take a bigger step in the organization. And I would tell the officers, I said, look, I don't want you giving the drills all the time. I said, what I want you to do is tag a firefighter and say, hey, in 3 shifts, I need you to give me a drill on whatever topic you want it to be. That gives them, a week and a half to research, maybe put a PowerPoint together or something, and then they're going to deliver that drill in front of the shift. It's going to build their confidence. It's going to show that you trust them to give good information, and it's going to give you leadership credibility. It's like, wow, Captain really trusts me, and he's letting me spread my wings a little bit. And then hopefully that'll carry over as they move forward in their ranks.
I agree with that. I actually, in my notes, I had to bring up, when people bring a problem, they should bring a solution. It doesn't mean that has to be the right solution, but it empowers them 100%. I think it empowers people to become part of the problem-solving process, right? And I'll be totally honest with you. I'm sure you're in a similar situation. I have plenty of my own work. I don't need any extra work, right? So I'm always looking for help. I'm always looking for people to step up and to chip in and do a little bit more. And that's a way to do it. Is just when we do get a problem, let's work it out. But don't just be a problem factory, right? Let's work together and come to a conclusion that we can both be happy with 9 out of 10 times. Especially with those like I said, those managers that are actually boots on the ground, out doing the calls, interacting with the public, putting their people in a position that's dangerous, right? And whether it's us or PD, you're putting people in positions of danger every day, and they need that, I think, to be boosted up, and I couldn't agree more with that statement.
Yeah, I think that when you allow people to make decisions and offer encouragement, to be, to not be that, person that they think you're going to lower the boom on them every time they do something, or even the micromanager. You get to the point where if your expectations get down into the weeds of, hey, when we run this fire, I want this line, and when we run that fire, I want this line. That's not your job as a battalion chief. Your expectations should be like, hey, when you run a fire, I want to make sure you got the appropriate line pulled and ready to do the work. Whatever that is, you figure it out. But like you said, I've got my own work to do. I've got to start filling out my chart. If you've got a problem going on in the station, you're an officer. I need you to handle it. If you need help, come to me with a solution, but don't put your problems on my desk because I got enough on my desk. I couldn't agree more. And I think that when you show the captains and lieutenants that you want them to make decisions and you trust them to come up with solutions and then put those solutions in play, you're going to get that buy-in. It's going to make them feel better as an officer. It's going to give them that little bit of credibility. They're going to start building their leadership credibility. And then they're also going to look at you as the boss, as somebody that's, I can really work with that guy, and he's inspiring, he's motivating, and things like that. I had the pleasure of sitting on a committee that's still ongoing right now. We're writing new policies, and we've got senior staff, a couple of people from senior staff, and then a couple of battalion chiefs, a couple of volunteers, and then a couple of people from the local, from the international, that's sitting on this committee. And myself and the other assistant chief, we just kind of sit back and watch these guys craft this policy and put it together, and just some of the things that they see. And I had a lieutenant and a captain that were representing the local. They were just kind of sitting in the back, not saying much. And I was like, look, guys, if we're creating an incident command policy, don't think for a second that this doesn't affect you. I want to see what you see, when I come into the block. So if we're going to make this incident command policy work, I need your input also. So don't think that whatever you bring to the table isn't valid because you're not a chief. That's false. And watch them craft this policy, and it's really good. And I think when you start to be able to bring in people that aren't senior staff to work on projects and to see how we collaborate together, I think that boosts the organization to where the ivory tower or headquarters or whatever is not this unobtainable place so we don't know what the heck's going on in there. Kind of pulls the curtain back to say, like, hey, man, we're all firefighters at the end of the day, and we want this to succeed. And I think that makes for a stronger organization. At least that's what I view. What do you think?
No, I totally agree with that. I think, there always was that fear of what was up in the headquarters lofts there, right? That they make the decisions behind, like you said, behind a curtain, and they're not down here doing what we're doing, but it is what it is, and there's no change in that. So bringing people in is vital, I think, to the overall good and to boosting up future leaders, right? I mean, really, that's what it does. It's all about boosting the future leaders. One of the things that I think is crucial too is as a leader, as a manager, as whatever you want to call it, known versus unknown, right? And when you're able to build out a committee on something, or you're able to get crew buy-in, a lot of that is obtained by knowing what you don't know, and then relying on the people who do know. And that has no rank, right? I mean, it could be as simple as, I had a call where there was a serious commercial furnace issue. Well, guess what? The guy who's standing outside, who just so happens to be driving that day, on the side, or his dad, or before he got on the job, he was a furnace guy. Well, let's get him in here and utilize his expertise, because I'm not going to pretend to know what I'm talking about with this issue, right? And that goes right to the firehouse issues, like you were saying. If you put a group of people together, one of them's probably going to have the answer, and it might not be the person in charge every time, right? And I think that's an overburden on people to expect that the quote unquote leader is going to be the answer key to everything, right? I mean, there are people who are great at hazmat that may not be the crew boss, right? Or the chief level officer. And that's when that chief level officer, or that crew boss, needs to be able to say, hey, Mike is really good at this stuff. He's far better than I am. Let's have him come in and break this down. And that's, that takes that building out the training in the firehouse to the next level, where you're actually including people that may know more, right? Who knows more about boats than Chris? So let's bring Chris in. Even though he's not a chief, he could explain to the chiefs live and in the flesh how we're going to handle this boat fire, right? Because he does that for a living, or knew what to do or whatever it was. So I think that's another piece of it is knowing what you know, but more importantly, knowing what you don't know, but knowing how to ask for that help or ask for the person who does know to give you a hand. So I think that's always been something that I've looked at is really important, for everything, for the overall good of the mission, but also for the the qualities of a good leader.
Yeah, and that comes down to humility, as captain or lieutenant or even a chief officer or the fire chief itself to understand that, hey, you know what, you don't have to know everything, but there are people out there that know. And for an assistant chief or a deputy or even the fire chief to reach out to a firefighter and say, hey, I understand, you just you left your career as a building engineer, had a degree in building engineer and construction or whatever. We want to talk about a little bit about construction, but it's not my field of expertise. What can you tell me? To be able to reach out and say, and I don't. So, hey, why don't you take the reins on this? Just because you're the chief does not mean you have to lead everything. There are people out there that are capable of moving the organization in a positive direction without being a chief officer. So it comes down to humility and ego. You got to put that in check. One of the things that you keyed in on is something that I've said all along is that, if there's a problem or if there's something that you want to get done, whatever it is, whoever's closest to that problem is the person that you want to turn to or the group of people you want to turn to solve it. One of the stories that I always tell is that we changed hoses and nozzles in Montgomery County before I left. I was a battalion chief. Why should I make the decision of the hose and nozzles that these guys are going to pull? I put together a group of captains and firefighters and said, hey, here's what we have. Here's the vendors that we're going to go with. There's 3 vendors. Here's all the equipment. I need you to run some tests, pump, all that stuff. At the end of the day, give me a recommendation and why. And they did. They knocked it out of the park. And all I did, and I made it very clear, I said, I am here to facilitate meetings and sign your overtime. And that's it. And I sat back and watched them go, and they put together a hell of a package. And it was something that everybody liked because it was designed, and it was the recommendations were made based on the people that ride the fire engines, not from the people that are riding in the F-150s that are in the climate-controlled environment, pecking away on their tactical worksheet. So I think that it's important to reach out to your people that are closest to an issue and get that input from them to help solve it. I got to give kudos to our fire chief, where I work now. He basically said, here's the area that we want to work on now. Here's the group of people that are going to be put together. All I want is to make sure that in these recommendations, they are noted in the policy, and just send us on our way. He didn't have his hands in it, and then we brought the information back to him, and we presented it, and everything was in a positive manner. So the fire chief doesn't have to drive everything. They just have to make sure that everything kind of stays on course. So it gets back to that whole micromanagement thing. We're busy. When you're senior staff, you're busy. You've got lots of stuff to do. You don't have time to do everybody else's stuff. So reach out into your organization and find somebody that can help you tackle those issues.
Yeah, and there's always going to be those people that want to step up, that have an understanding of what needs to be done. Those people are out there, and a good leader is going to know that before they need them, right? I think a leader needs to know their people inside and out, and by that I mean you need to know their skills, their strengths, their weaknesses, capitalize on their strengths, build up their weaknesses, and at the same time do it for yourself. Allow them to help you build on your weaknesses. Ask your people, what can we do, or what even can I do, right? One of the things when I made lieutenant, which, in our department is first level supervisor, you have, anywhere from 3 to 5 people underneath you, maybe a firehouse if the captain's off and you're going to step up and run the firehouse for the day. But one of the things I did was I talked to a couple of my friends who, some of whom made lieutenant as well with me, some of whom weren't, right? They were just privates or firefighters, rank and file. I said, listen, keep me in check, right? Keep an eye on me. If you hear something that I'm doing wrong, don't be afraid to come to me and say, call me. We'll go to coffee. We'll have a beer after work, whatever it is, and say, hey, listen, just so you know, I'm hearing this didn't go well. Or, hey, just so you know, Lou, I had a little bit of an issue. And I empowered my people to tell me when I made a mistake or when I was doing something wrong or when I could improve on something. Because let's face it, when you're in management, you're going to tell people that they're maybe not doing something correctly or that they need to improve on something. Well, what about us, right? Somebody needs to be able to tell us that too. And it shouldn't just be the next level of supervision yelling back down to you the way that you're dealing with your people, right? It's the old, crap rolls downhill type of a thing. Well, you know what? You need to take some of the crap from below too and analyze it and see what they're saying, right? Because if they're saying, man, every time we go, for training, he's yelling at us. Well, maybe in my mind, I'm not yelling. I'm just, amped up or excited or whatever it is, But to hear that from everybody, you might be like, wow, I never viewed it like that. And make a change as a result of it, be willing to adapt. I think you're going to have nothing but success from that. It's when we, like you said, the ego gets in the way. And then all of a sudden, everybody just, oh, man, I got to work with Justin today. This is going to suck. He's going to be yelling at me. He's going to be talking down to me. He never takes our input. He never, whatever it is, I don't ever want to be that person. And I think, it's crucial to be willing to hear some of the bad stuff too, and to grow from it and learn from it and build on it. So, those are really important things.
Yeah, I think it's important as an officer in the organization or a chief officer to be able to be mature enough and, again, humble enough to hear some of the bad, or maybe not bad, but some of the things that people have concerns with you, and to be able to take a step back and say, okay, they're not trying to embarrass me, or they're not trying to demean me. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And I've said it time and again. There's a way to ask people questions. You still have to respect the rank. So you don't go up to somebody in a crowd and say, you sound like shit on the radio and you're screaming like a baby, So you pull the person aside and say, hey, Chief, look, every time we run drills and stuff like that, it sounds like you're always yelling. Are you mad at us, or did we do something wrong? And you should be mature enough to sit back and say, I didn't realize I was doing that. And now I've got to work on that. I don't want to come across as that I'm mad and yelling at everybody when I'm not, or when I don't think I'm yelling. I don't want people to think that I'm angry at them when I'm not. So then that's something that you would have to work on, and people would notice that. But moreover, that person that brought it to your attention would recognize that you're hearing them, you're listening to them, taking in what they're saying, and then actively going to make that change in yourself. And that, to me, pushes your leadership credibility way above what it would currently be, because you are not afraid to take that criticism, and you're not afraid to make the adjustments in yourself, especially if you didn't recognize that you were doing something like that. So, again, ego in check, humility, and listen and absorb what people are saying, especially if more than one person's saying it. Not everybody can be wrong. And adjust accordingly. And like you said, reach back out to the people that have that institutional knowledge that you may not have, and reach out for them as that subject matter expert. It's funny, I had somebody send me a message the other day that the I-Chiefs were doing some hazmat conference or whatever, and they said they sent a message, said, hey Dave, are you interested in teaching for this? And I kind of laughed and I said, my knowledge of hazmat is I get on the radio and I'll say, Commander, the hazmat supervisor, come to my vehicle. That's my extent of hazmat knowledge, because that guy's a subject matter expert, and he's going to be sitting in the passenger seat, and he's going to run that hazmat operation, and I'll take care of all the firefighters and the things that they're doing.
I mean, that's it right there, right? Like I supervise, or I have several paramedics, right? I have a good swath of paramedics under me. I worked on an ambulance for years, right? I became a BLS supervisor before I came to New Haven. I can EMT the heck out of something. Don't ask me a paramedic question, because I'm not going to pretend to know, how to intubate or how to, read a heart monitor properly. And, even the equipment has evolved. So for me, I'm going to rely on somebody who's a paramedic, right? And I'm not going to pretend to understand what they're doing. And when we run into issues with the paramedics, I immediately call our paramedic supervisor and say, Dan, stop down in the office. I got to talk to you about something. And I need you to explain all the pieces that I need to know, right? And it happens all the time, and you have to be okay with it, right? You have to be okay with not knowing something. It doesn't mean you don't evolve and learn it, but at the moment, you don't know it. So you have to learn it. You have to get the right people to teach it to you. And like I said, you have to know which people you can go to learn it, right? And that's knowing your people, which is, I think, a crucial part of the whole game.
It's funny you mentioned the paramedic stuff. I was never a paramedic, but when I was a station commander, as a captain, I was responsible for ordering all the supplies for the station. That included cleaning supplies, office supplies. It also included EMS and medical supplies. And I'm thinking, like, who the hell am I? I can't order epi and all. I don't know what the crap, what I'm supposed to order. So I grabbed my medic master and I told her, I said, Christy, I said, I need you to take this component, do an inventory of everything, tell me what all the stuff that you need and the amounts and all that stuff, and then just give it to me. I trusted her to do the inventory and give me the correct information so I can make the order. And as far as I know, I never got in trouble and we never ran out of stuff that we needed. But she was my subject matter expert. She was my medic master, and she took care of that stuff. So I mean, there's no way I could have faked my way through that. It would have shown pretty quick when I would have ordered the wrong stuff. So again, we go back to, use your people. Utilize them for the expertise, the experience, and the knowledge that they bring to the table. It doesn't matter what color helmet they're wearing. Everybody brings something to the table, and everybody has a valid voice. So we're getting down towards the end here. So I want to ask you one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. So we're talking about, in the beginning we talked about, building a leadership class and all that stuff and things like that you would want to see in the class. But do you have any classes that you have taken in the past or have heard of? Any books that you would want somebody to to get into and read that would kind of help them move forward in their career if they looking to take the captain, lieutenant captain, chief in a leadership realm? Anything, tips, any things that you could offer for somebody that wants to move forward in their career?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll be honest with you. One of the best places that I've gotten some leadership training is through TED Talks, right? And totally separate from the fire service. And one of the things that I like is looking at some of the leadership talks on there, which are great. Of course, I'm drawing a blank. I just went completely blank. I had a gentleman's name, and I'll get it back. But going outside of the fire service and looking at leaders. It could be military leaders, it could be corporate leaders, and seeing the pros and cons of dealing with people. The other thing, it's Your Ship. It's a great book. It's written by an admiral in the Navy. You could look it up. I'm sure it's readily available anywhere. But great story of building up a military ship and what goes into it and all the different pieces of leadership and how it was done and the success story that came of it. This is going to sound probably a little crazy. One of the books I read early on, and it's not for the military tactic of it, it's for the dealing with people tactic, but Sun Tzu's Art of War is great for understanding people, and you can adapt it to whatever you're dealing with, right? I think. I read that every couple of years, and and just get brushed up on it. But I think going outside of your element, right? So that would be somebody in the corporate world listening to you and I talk about fire service leadership. That would be somebody from the PD listening to a fire department thing. Going outside of our world and learning what people are doing that's successful in another world. And like I said, corporate America, they're in kind of a similar boat from what I've gathered in talking to people. People move into management positions, and the difference there is, you and I stayed in a position or on a department for 20 years, right? In corporate America, there's turnover constantly, so they don't have time to train key leaders. So finding some of the ways that they're doing it that's quick, easy, and are great. And like I said, right now you can go on YouTube. You could do, look up these TED Talks or look up, 10-minute conversations with business leaders, and they'll teach you about people. And I think if you could start by understanding people, that's key. And then when you get to FDIC, there's no shortage of leadership classes. I know Anthony Avillo has done some leadership stuff. Frank Ritchie's done some leadership stuff. Those guys are great Northeast guys. And then you get into like an Anthony Castros out West who does some stuff that's great. These are people who have done it. They've been there. They've been in the position. They've learned from their errors, and they're able to share them. And I think that's crucial. So, but definitely venture outside of whatever your world is, right? And see what's being done, because people are people. Right? The fire service is just a microcosm of humanity. And so if it's working somewhere else, it's probably going to work. You might have to adapt it, but it's probably going to work in whatever industry or department you're with. So I think those are the ways that I've done it. But and still, there's nothing wrong with experience too. Learn from watching good people and learn from watching bad people. It shouldn't be the only teacher alone. But I could tell you 5 things off the top of my head that I loved about my first lieutenant, and I could tell you 5 things that were pretty challenging with my first lieutenant. And I've really used those to kind of shape who I've become, and I've listened to those that have come before me. I've always tried to be the more of the listener when I don't know something. People will probably laugh when they hear that, because I do talk a lot. But if I don't know something, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to try to learn from somebody who does know. And that's really led to a lot of my success, I think. Those are the key things that I would take away as far as growing and learning. And it goes right back to when we were talking about building out a leadership class, the continuing education piece of it, staying progressive, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way, but staying up on what's going on, when it's going on, and not playing catch up all the time. Keep your head in whatever you're trying to learn, whatever your craft is. If that means that you're a chief level officer taking an entry level class, sometimes that's okay, right? Not always, right? But if there's something you need to improve upon or you haven't touched in a while, just making chief might mean that you're not touching the tech rescue stuff on a regular basis. Show up for their drill, stand there and learn. Don't stand there and observe and try to ridicule. Stand there and be a student. And I think continuing to be a student at all times really helps, in anything, but especially in the leadership world.
Absolutely. I think that as an officer, we should continually learn our craft, and the day that we get tired and we don't want to learn or take classes anymore is the day we should just hang up our gear and retire. But it's definitely something that as a leader, as a chief officer, you need to continually to educate yourself, and make yourself better. And like you said, learn some of the new things that are out there. It's you got to break the mold of the 2 things that firemen hate is the way things are and change. We got to break that, and we got to learn that there's new ways to do things, and and adapt them. Maybe it might not work exactly how it's being shown, or the way that you saw it used if you go to FDIC or something like that. But maybe there's a way you can adapt it and take it from there. So, well, Justin, I appreciate you being on the show, and it makes I enjoy talking to different people that can bring a good, unique perspective on leadership and the things that they learn. So it makes this podcast pretty successful. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend and recording the show.
No, it was great. I really appreciate that you even considered me for it, and it's always exciting to talk to other people that have a common interest. One of the things that I always talk about when you go to these conferences, whether it's FDIC or it's the local one at the state academy, is it should revitalize whatever's going on with you, right? Because eventually everybody does get into a rut where, they kind of get, they're not as excited as they were on day one walking through the door. Getting involved and talking to other people who have a common interest and common goals, it revitalizes you and it makes you feel really good about what you're doing and makes you try to strive to be better at what you're doing, which, if you're not striving to be better, like you said, hang it up. It's time to go. And you'll know when that time comes. I've talked to a lot of people who said, yep, you know when it's time. And when you stop learning, when you stop caring, when you stop getting revitalized and excited to talk about the mission, the common goals, and getting things done, then you'll know, right? So I really appreciate the time, and I think it was a great conversation. I hope everybody enjoys it.
Awesome. Well, take care and be safe. And if I don't see you anytime in the near future, maybe I'll see you at FDIC.
Absolutely, I'll see you there for sure, and I appreciate it again. Thanks.
Have
a great weekend and stay safe.
Bye.